Well, thank you guys for coming out on quite a wet Sunday morning like this to hear about a very important topic, but also hopefully you'll have a chance to get some of your burning questions answered. So I want to leave a bit of time for you to ask me questions about various topics. And of course, one place you can find out about a lot of it is our website here, which is creation.com, as you see down there. I hope you can remember that. Creation.com is our website, and every day it's updated with something new, and especially something topical. If something is in the newspaper that's really topical, we will try to have an article on it in the next few days, like the latest missing link they've found, for instance. Well, remember they found one last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. In fact, going back to my high school, they don't believe those anymore. They won't tell you that. The stuff I learned in high school, they don't believe they're missing links anymore, but they're hoping that you get bombarded with all this evolutionary propaganda that you'll think that it's actually a fact. And for instance, the great day in America when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I wrote a big article about that and why it was a good thing. And there's still more work to do, of course. But one way you can be connected to our website is by our free email newsletter. It's called the Infobites. And again, we promise not to spam you or to sell or give your address to a third party. But what it will do is alert you to stuff that's on our website, the current material. But also, if you put your name and your email so we can send it to you as an email newsletter, but put your postcode as well, because then you'll be notified of any creation speaker coming into your area as well. So you guys want to pass the clipboards, please? Thanks. And you may know that at the back of this room there's a resource table. Now, we're an equipping ministry where CMI exists to equip the church and the home with reasons why you can trust the Bible right from its very first book, okay? Because as I've mentioned, talk about my Genesis commentary here, all the doctrines of Christianity had their beginnings in the early chapters of Genesis. And I also want to show you how Jesus and the apostles all understood Genesis to be a historical record, and it's the only commentary in the world that talks about dinosaurs and design of living things and evidence for the flood. And see, we are motivated at CMI by this verse is one of the things that motivate us is to be ready to give an answer to everyone that asks you a reason of the hope that is in you. We're supposed to have reasons for what we believe. Christianity is not a blind faith. In fact, Jesus said the greatest commandment, first of all, love the Lord. This is the greatest command. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Nothing. You remember the mind part? Nothing about checking your brains in at the church door to be a Christian. That's not the biblical way. We're supposed to have good reasons and be prepared with reasons so we can defend it for other people. And that means we need to have answers for things like Noah's flood. Where did the water come from and where did it go? And what about alien life with all the science fiction stuff around? And what other things? Carbon dating. Now you'll find answers to this as well as questions on dinosaurs in this book called the Creation Answers book. And it's also part of this the starter pack here, which actually has basically a free DVD as well. My book, Refuting Evolution, is the best-selling creation book in the world, apart from the Bible, of course. It's designed for the high school student. So now I want to talk about what a dinosaur is, because I think before we can really discuss a topic intelligently, we need to know what we're talking about, what the words mean. See, this is a danger of the cults who come knocking at your door. They will often use the same words as we do, but have a totally warped meaning of those words. So you've got to get them to define what they mean by certain words. And same goes for dinosaur. Dinosaur has a very distinctive structure. All the dinosaurs had legs that were vertical, they were column-like, so quite an efficient design for fast running in many cases. And they had this thigh bone here at the top. It's called a processus, which means a projection of a bone, and it lodges in the hip bone here. Another unique feature of the dinosaurs, though, is apart from the leg structure. We look at crocodiles are like this. Crocodiles and lizards are like this. They're sprawling out. It's not proper to say that these things are dinosaurs. It's a different definition, okay? But this thing here goes into a hollow part here. See, every other thing has a cup shape there. The fancy term is called acetabulum, which means little vinegar cup, because there's a cup shape in most things, including us. We have a cup shape thing there in our hips. Okay, but dinosaurs had a hole there. That's very distinctive about dinosaurs, the hole here. Now, hopefully I've given you some ideas of what makes a dinosaur unique among creatures. But then we should go to where we find the facts about history, and that's the history book of the universe. That's what the Bible is. It goes from the beginning of the universe and carries right through to the end of this present age and into eternity past. So it's a real history book, and it does tell us when dinosaurs existed, okay? Because in Genesis 1, it tells us that God made the beasts of the earth on day 6. Now, this phrase, according to their kinds, is very important. Genesis says it 10 times. So God created different kinds of creature. He created them with a huge amount of genetic diversity so they could have lots of variety in their offspring. So lots of variation within the created kind. God programmed it that way. God programmed so they can diversify. But what we don't see is one kind turning into another kind. And among the kinds of beasts included the dinosaurs. That's what dinosaurs are. They're a kind of beast. Okay, but also on day 6, God made humans. And therefore, from this, you can deduce that humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Now, that's radical because I won't tell you that at schools or the universities or the newspapers or Hollywood. But that's what the Bible tells us. So people might ask you then, okay, why don't we find human fossils and dinosaur fossils together if they lived at the same time? So get behind that assumption. The assumption behind that question is if things live together, then you will find their fossils together. But is this the correct assumption? Well, I tell you that it's not, because here is an example where it's clearly not a good assumption. In the front, we have the coelacanth, which was said to have died out with the dinosaurs because of where we find it in the fossil record. In the back, we have a whale flipper. And the thing is, coelacanths were supposed to be extinct with the dinosaurs, but we know they're alive today. So there are coelacanths alive in the sea today, and there are whales alive in the sea today, but they're never found fossilized together. So the thing is, just because they live together, there's no guarantee that they'll be fossilized together. And this goes to understand that the fossil record is not a sequence of age, it's a sequence of burial, mostly by the flood of Noah's day. So what we're seeing is things going to be buried together. And the thing is, where dinosaurs live, they seem to live in different regions from, say, humans, and therefore you wouldn't expect them to be buried with humans. But it's interesting that dinosaurs are often found buried with sea creatures. Now that's interesting. Dinosaurs and sea creatures can't be living together because one's on the land, one's on the sea. But yet they're found buried together. And that is explained because you have this global flood and you have a basin in the rocks, and the flood washes different creatures from sea and land together in the basin. And that's why they are buried together, even though we know they didn't live together. So this shows why the flood is important to understand. And I'll talk about it next time as well, to understand that the flood explains most of the fossil record, and also obliterates the need for millions of years. Because in many scientific and many physical processes, you can exchange intensity for time. So when you have something as intense as a flood, you don't need lots of time. Now, among the things buried by the flood were clearly creatures we now call dinosaurs. Some were huge, as you see here. This is huge. No question, okay? Brachiosaurus was huge. This is the height of a 4-story building, amazingly huge. And see, here's a little example of how humans compare with some of these big creatures. I mean, some of them are the biggest creatures ever to walk the land. Okay, now, in fact, big size requires design features. You can't just magically scale up a small creature to become a big creature. There are a lot of other designs that have to go along with the increased size. I'll give you one example. What we have, for instance, a giraffe, it's very tall. And the question is, how do you get blood from the heart to the brain, pushing it up against gravity for so high? What do you do? How do you do that? It needs a design feature. And the design feature, it needs a blood pressure of about 300 over 180. Now, can you imagine that? I don't know how familiar you are with blood pressure measurements. You should be. Now, 120 over 80 is okay. It's pretty good. If a human gets 180, that's a hypertensive emergency. Go to the hospital. It's very dangerous. Okay, get that pressure down. Okay, but the giraffe needs that high pressure to get the blood up to the brain. So it has a very powerful, big heart, about over 20-pound heart. That's a big heart. And designed so it can keep on pumping at high pressure without getting what they call fibrosis, which a human gets if with high blood pressure. It ruins the heart as well. Our heart isn't designed for that sort of blood pressure, but the giraffe's heart is. Then what happens when the giraffe bends down? Why doesn't it blow its brain out? And scientists have been looking at this for decades, literally decades. Scientists have wondered why the giraffe doesn't blow its brains out, a hemorrhagic stroke. And now they realize they've got some veins in the neck, and what happens when the giraffe bends down, the blood goes to the veins here. It doesn't get back to the heart, therefore the heart has less to push against, therefore the blood pressure automatically drops. So it's automatic blood pressure regulating system in these very tall animals. And when the giraffe raises his head again, the blood goes back into the heart, is immediately pushed up to the brain, so it doesn't get lightheaded. You know what it's like? You're lying down and you get up too quickly, you feel, because it takes time for a lot of the blood to get to your head, that's why. But the giraffe doesn't have that problem. So, I mean, this is a design feature that's needed for very tall creatures, and the Brachiosaurus is much taller than the giraffe, so it must have had some sort of feature like that. Unfortunately, I got no clue what it was. I know God must have programmed with something like this, but what exactly? I don't know. We only have the bones. We haven't got the soft tissue to tell us what it was, but it must have had something, okay? Like, I mean, its blood pressure would have been about 750 or so. So imagine the sort of hearts it must have had, as well as some sort of regulating system, so this thing doesn't blow its brains out when it drinks. Okay, so it's an idea of what sort of things must go into the design of a very big creature. Okay, then, so here's a question. What was the biggest dinosaur? Anyone have an idea? Okay. The which, sorry? Tyrannosaurus rex was certainly the biggest of the meat-eating a Brontosaurus. Well, that's an interesting thing. Oh, yes, sir, go on. Brachiosaurus, I think, was a good answer, because I think the Brachiosaurus is the biggest dinosaur, the heaviest one where we have a complete skeleton. The Brontosaurus was a very, very big creature, no question, except that it didn't exist. That's the only problem with it. I mean, okay, I'm not going to make fun of you. See, the Brontosaurus, what they did is they found this big creature called an Apatosaurus, but they didn't have the head, so they put another head called the Camarasaurus on the Apatosaurus skeleton, and they named that Brontosaurus. Now, certainly the Apatosaurus, the underlying thing was a very big creature, no question, okay? No question, the Brontosaurus means thunder lizard, okay? Big creature, no question. But it did become because they put a wrong head on the Apatosaurus. And see, when they realize that, they have to go by the earlier name. That's the rule. When we're naming, they go by the first valid name that's been done, which is Apatosaurus. So that's where Brontosaurus. It wasn't a bad answer, just that there's a bit of history behind the naming of that thing. Okay, so it's not a bad answer at all. Here's one possible answer. This one here, I mean, look, it's off scale. They said it's 200 feet long. That's huge. 120 tons or so more. Okay. The thing is, I've sort of touched on this just now. What is the evidence for these creatures? That's another thing to ask when they talk about, say, the missing link, to ask, what is the evidence they have for these things? See, here is a chart I've got here. Okay, the black part here is the reconstruction, but what they actually found is the white stuff. Now, with the Brachiosaurus, we've basically got the whole skeleton. So yeah, I think we know the Brachiosaurus was pretty big. Diplodocus is a very long creature. We've got most of the skeleton here. So fair enough, we know these are big creatures. And here's a human, just to give you an idea. It's big, right? But some of these other things, we've got not that many bones of it. So the evidence for some of these creatures being so big is sort of lacking. Okay, we've got a fair idea. If it has a thigh bone, leg bone this big, it must have been quite big, but we really don't know how big it was, honestly. We haven't got the bones for it. And this one here, the top one here, it's actually a broken bone is what they found, okay? And it's been lost. We don't know, we can't do it anymore. We can't find the bone to go and remeasure and make sure they've got the measurements right. It's gone. And here's another one for you, Photolonchosaurus. But again, we've got none of the legs or tail. It might be the biggest dinosaur we know from over half the skeleton, but we are missing a lot of it. Or this one, the Dreadnoughtus, has got a nice complete skeleton there, except for the neck and the head. We often, as I say, we often find heads missing of these things. Well, if they died in a flood, often their heads would be sort of become fragile and be taken off. Okay, so that's why we don't find heads of these things a lot. But it's interesting, this thing here, the discoverers said it had a weaponized tail 30 feet long. Here's a human here, so 30 feet long, and see the tail is almost as thick as a human, it's tall. Okay, so very powerful muscles. You can tell incredible muscles because of these bones here. These bones had muscles attached to them to move the tail, so they could tell it's a very powerful tail. It could swat anything that tried to attack it, okay? Now, I think dinosaurs are in the Bible, but they're not the word dinosaur. Often we have things which are in the Bible in the concept, even if the word is not used, okay? Like the Trinity is a word that's not in the Bible. The concept definitely is taught, okay? No question. The Bible says the Father's God, the Son's God, the Holy Spirit's God. There's one God, okay? That's the Trinity for you, okay? Clearly taught in the Bible, but the word Trinity isn't in the Bible, okay? What else isn't in the Bible? Bible. Okay, and the same thing, of course, we know the concept of Scripture is in the Bible, of course, okay. But the concept of dinosaur, I believe, is in the Bible, even if the word is not, okay. For instance, the word dinosaur is a very new word. And you think of all these different Bibles that were translated into English before the word dinosaur was available. So, of course, they're not going to have a word that didn't exist. See, dinosaur was invented by this man, Sir Richard Owen, and it means terrible lizard. A lot of the names of dinosaurs have saurus in the name, which means lizard or reptile, okay? So dinosaur means terrible reptile, terrible lizard. And see, he was very much a leading scientist of his day who opposed Darwin. See, Darwin actually had a lot of opposition from the scientific community. Unfortunately, he had support from the Church of England. So you might say there was a religion versus science battle here, but the opposite way of what you might think. Many scientists opposed Darwin, and too many churchmen supported Darwin. Now, here's another word you might be familiar with. I mean, calculator. Calculator, that's a modern word. It seems like a modern word, right? I mean, some of you are old enough that you had to use slide rules and logbooks, right? I had to at high school, okay. I'm aging myself a bit, I guess. But the word calculator goes back to the Middle Ages. It goes back to the 14th century, if not earlier. So the word calculator is a much older word than dinosaur, but you think of calculators as being modern and dinosaurs as being ancient, but the words are the opposite. Calculator is an old word, dinosaur is a new word. But you see, one book that gives you some ideas is the book of Job, which I think was the earliest Bible book to be finished. Okay, Genesis goes from creation up to the time of Joseph. Book of Job was written around the time of Abraham or Isaac. Maybe Jacob, okay? So Job was finished before Genesis was finished. It's the oldest completed book of the Bible. And when you go to the book of Job, towards the end, we see these chapters on real animals. God is giving Job and his friends, so-called friends, a creation lesson about different animals. We know what these are, okay? No problem. And that means Job was expected to know what these are. God is using things that Job is aware of. Then he gets to Job 40 and he gets, behold, behemoth. See, Job was meant to know what this is. However, English translators did not know what it was, so they didn't translate the word. They left it as the Hebrew word. That's not a translation, that's the transliteration of the Hebrew. They didn't know what it meant, so they left it alone. Now, I can tell you some things of what it means. See, behemoth is a plural word in Hebrew, and behemah is a singular, one word. See, behemah means one beast, and behemoth means more than one beast. And yet, it's clearly one animal here, so why do you have a plural word? The answer is, it's meant to be the beast of beasts. Hence the plural words. It's to say, this is the biggest creature God had made. And I made him along with you, so I made him on day 6 of creation week. Okay, humans and animals were made on the same day of creation. And then we see things like he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. Now, what's a cedar? It's a very big tree. Here's a big tree, right? So in the Bible, whenever something is compared to a cedar, it is how big and long and powerful it is. It's meant to be something incredibly powerful when something's compared to a cedar. So God is telling us something. This creature had a tail like this. But some translations have been evolutionized. They believe dinosaurs died out 66 million years ago, so of course it can't be a dinosaur. So what's the biggest creature we know today? Well, an elephant. So does an elephant have a tail like a cedar? Another candidate, a very big animal, in fact, the most dangerous animal in Africa is the hippopotamus. Kills more people than lions or crocodiles, okay? Very dangerous. It's a plant eater, but it still kills you. But does a hippo have a tail like a cedar? Maybe not, huh? So what is a good candidate then? Well, here we go. I think it had to be a creature like this, or maybe a creature like this. Remember I told you about the weaponized tail, 30 feet long? This is a tail I'd call compared to a cedar. Certainly not the elephant or a hippo tail. It has to be a tail like this. Now there's also another creature called Leviathan in the book of Job, which was not a dinosaur. I think it was a giant crocodile called Dinosuchus, or maybe Sarcosuchus. Here is the biggest crocodile today, the saltwater crocodile. And here is a Dinosuchus, much, much bigger and more powerful. And also, it tells you its skin is basically proof against harpoons, because we know the Dinosuchus had armor on its skin. They had bony plates on the skin, which would have made it very resistant to harpoons. So I think a giant armored crocodile like Dinosuchus, or maybe something like Sarcosuchus, could have been the Leviathan. So not a dinosaur, because crocodiles have the sprawling legs, but still this is the answer to what the Leviathan probably was a Dinosuchus. Again, something extinct today, but something that Job was clearly meant to be aware of. Otherwise, why would God say, behold this creature, if Job didn't have a clue what it was? God was trying to teach something. The Bible itself was meant to be understandable. So it's God's communication to man. Okay, but some other examples of humans seeing dinosaurs might be something like this stegosaur here. Now, this is a very distinctive type of creature, right? And yet it was found, it's been in an 800-year-old temple in Cambodia. Very much of Angkor Wat is very much a tourist attraction from Cambodia, but it has something like a stegosaurus. Isn't that something? And yet, and also, there's no creature alive today that has this sort of distinctive plating on its back there. And it's interesting also, there are no known fossils of this creature in the area. So they couldn't have just said, well, here's a fossil stegosaurus, let's draw something like this. No, they must have seen a living one. Another reason I'll tell you that is because when it was rediscovered in America in the 19th century, the discoverer called it Stegosaurus, meaning roof lizard, because he thought the plates were flat down on the back to protect it, okay? So the first discoverers in modern science had the plate structure wrong. Now they realize the plates really were upright. So these people had the right plate arrangement, which sort of hints they must have seen a living one, because the people who just relied on the fossils got the plate arrangement wrong. And also in China, you might know about the zodiac in Chinese, a 12-year cycle. I mean, we just had the Chinese New Year. That's what they go by, the lunar calendar. And it's actually the year of the dragon this year too, okay? Now, as far as the Chinese are concerned, the dragon's just another animal. I mean, these are all animals we know. The dragon seems to be just as real as everything else in the Chinese calendar. So it seems that the dragon, being a very important part of Chinese culture, I think it's because people in China remember the dinosaurs and call them dragons. So a lot of the dragon legends around the world might have been people seeing dinosaurs. Now it's interesting, the word for dragon in Chinese is long, and the word for dinosaur is konglong, which means terrible dragon. So they see the connection between dragon and dinosaur. And some of the Chinese dinosaurs they're discovering in China often have names ending in long, meaning something dragon, while we call them something saurus, meaning something reptile. So Chinese is something dragon. Like this one here, for instance, this is a dinosaur named by Westerners, so it's got a Western name. But it's interesting how they've got a carving 4,000 years old, which looks just like this thing here. So clearly there are carvings and pictures and stories about humans that found creatures that we now call dinosaurs, but call them dragons. Okay, so what happened to them? Well, okay, I think a lot of the dinosaurs were fossilized during the flood. Like these ones here. Have you seen this sort of picture here? This is from Mongolia. These dinosaurs were fossilized in the middle of a flood. And the fossils themselves are evidence of very quick burial. And so quick that these dinosaurs couldn't get away and get out of the fight and run from whatever was going to bury them. They were buried really quickly. And often the layers they're buried in span continents and even have matching layers on different continents. So you've got these huge wide layers pointing to a global flood, not just a local flood, okay? And in fact, to get a fossil at all, I mean, think about this. Have you ever seen fossil roadkill? No, you need to, if you don't bury it, it's going to rot away, decay, and it's also going to be eaten by other things. So the only way you get a fossil is to bury it quite deeply. I'll talk about that in the main service, okay? But this is what the scientists were thinking. The evolutionary scientists say that they were buried while they were fighting. Another thing that they found is the necks being thrown back. They call this the dinosaur death pose. It's so common in creatures with very long necks. So how did this happen? Well, that was another mystery for scientists. Why do we find the dinosaurs in this strange death pose? Well, they seem to work it out now because they killed some chickens and dunked them in water and their necks swung back. Because they have a very strong elastic ligament down their spine, okay, around the backbone. I mean, think about this. Holding up a weight like this. It's not too hard. Try and hold it this way. It's much harder, right? Well, think about the dinosaur having to hold up its head like this with a much longer neck. That's going to get your muscles tired quickly. So they were designed to have an elastic ligament to do most of that work. Now, after the ligament doesn't do all the work, the muscles have to do something, but just not as much, okay? But okay, after death, the muscles don't work, you expect the thing to flop down, okay? But imagine then, these dinosaurs were in water around the time of death, and the water's buoyancy will take up most of the weight, and therefore the ligament is strong enough to pull the head back. And with these chickens, they tried the same thing. They cut that ligament, and the head's no longer swung back. So it's clearly the ligament's what's doing it. So these dinosaurs would have had a ligament that when they're dunked in water, when they're dead, the muscles aren't working, the ligament will now pull the head right back, very unnaturally back. It's a very unnatural posture, that, but they're all found in that sort of posture. Well, not all, but a lot of the big dinosaurs with long necks, they're found in this sort of posture, which says they're underwater around the time of death. So what could have caused lots of dinosaurs to be underwater at the time of death? And then they're buried in that position, so they can't get out of it. So a lot of different things point to dinosaurs being buried by the flood. Another piece of evidence comes from footprints. So think about this. If you left a footprint outside, how long do you expect it to last for? Millions of years? 1 year? 1 week? Not long, right? See, these dinosaur footprints back in my home state of Queensland in Australia, they were actually under a rock. They were under the next layer of rock, which is supposed to be millions of years younger. This layer of the footprints, millions of years later, this rock layer came and buried them. So they removed the rock layer, tons and tons of this rock removed, and uncovered these 3,000 plus footprints. And the footprints started to wear away. So they put a shed over it. That wasn't enough. So now they're in a conservation building that controls temperature, humidity, stops running water, running animals, running people. Okay, all these things. So stop the footprints being worn away. And they're in rock now, but when they were made, they must have been made in something soft enough to leave an impression, right? So made in soft rock is now hard rock, but even the hard rock is wearing away. Here's the building to try to protect these things. But they want to tell us that these footprints lasted for millions of years before the next rock layer was on top of them. Now, what this proves really is that there was not much time between when the footprints were laid and when they were buried and cemented in place and protected. So that's the third thing for the flood, is that you've got these rapidly formed layers, and also huge wide layers spanning continents, but also very little time between the layers. Hence structures like footprints and raindrop marks and ripple marks, which have to be buried quickly to preserve the impression before it gets worn away. So a lot of things here. Another interesting thing is that the footprints of just about every creature we see are dated to be millions of years younger than a creature that could have made them. But this doesn't make any sense, though, because obviously a dinosaur or any other creature is not going to live for millions of years. So what we're seeing here is you have these animals trying to escape the flood, leaving footprint marks. Then those footprints are buried low down. The dinosaurs retreat to higher ground, and the flood catches up with them on the higher ground. And that's not just for dinosaurs. That's for every other creature around has that same sort of thing. Footprints down here, animal up here. In fact, in the forthcoming Creation magazine, we've got an article about bird tracks being much older than birds, according to the evolutionary dating method, okay? This is according to the evolutionists. Now, another evidence for young age is, in fact, finding blood cells in dino bones. And Dr. Mary Schweitzer talked about this, been doing this for 30 years now. The bones are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Well, exactly, right? I mean, here she is on 60 Minutes being interviewed.
Mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was, and it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No.
She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what? You
I didn't want to tell anybody.
that you'd be ridiculed,
Yes.
right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels. And, I was like shocked. I mean,
How could that be?
How could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones,
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seemed to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science, that organic material can't possibly survive even 1 million years, let alone 68 million.
What are the mission there? The rules of science say they can't be 1 million years old. Aren't we supposed to be trusting the science? But they want to have their faith in the millions of years. They won't abandon that faith. Because they need millions of years for evolution. I'm not saying millions of years gives you evolution. I'm saying without it, you certainly can't have evolution, okay? So there's no question that dinosaurs must have been buried really quickly and not very long ago. So now I want to get at what could have happened to most of them. I want to talk about the flood and how, if the dinosaurs are buried in the flood, how come people like Job and the Chinese culture and lots of different cultures saw dinosaurs? Well, it means they must have been on the ark. Not this horrible picture. Please don't use that picture. It's horrible, okay? You show kids that picture, they think the ark's a fairy story, just one of the other many fairy stories they're learning about, okay? But the ark is not a fairy story. It's a matter of history. And there's no reason we can't show kids the ark in ways that are child appropriate, that show how big this thing really was. Not this stupid thing with a bathtub and a giraffe neck sticking through the chimney and all happy and smiling because the world's been destroyed or whatever, okay? Well, here is the ark, okay? We're told 300 cubits. So what's a cubit? Elbow to fingertip. Mine's about 19 inches, okay? Let's assume the cubit was 18 inches, just to be conservative. So 300 by 50 by 30, what do we see? The ark was longer than a football field and wide enough to block 6 lanes of the interstate and taller than a 4-story building. And here are the humans for scale. See, they're huge, right? The ark's huge compared to us. So it's a big vessel. It's not just a tiny little thing like this. And that's the question. I mean, it has to be a global flood where you have to build this huge ark to rescue people. A local flood, you just migrate somewhere like Lot did from Sodom, okay? And you can calculate. You know what? The semi-trailers are on the road. Well, semi, okay. They block all the lanes. They're not supposed to block the left lane. They do anyway. They don't care. You can't see the signs in front of you. And each one of them can carry a lot of sheep, okay. Each one of these could carry 300 sheep weighing 100 pounds each or more, okay. So the ark could carry the equivalent volume of 340 of these. So it's important to understand how big this ark was. 340 times the carrying capacity of a semi-trailer. So it means the ark could hold 100,000 sheep-sized animals, and most animals are smaller than a sheep. You think about the roosters and the lizards, the pussycats and things. A lot of animals are much smaller than a sheep. Not that many animals which are much bigger than a sheep, okay? And also had very stable dimensions too, that even waves 500 feet high or more could knock this thing over. So God knew what he was doing when he made an ark of these proportions. It made it a very stable vessel. So what sort of animals did it have on there? Well, it didn't have to have sea creatures. It's rescuing land creatures, but also it's land vertebrate creatures is what the animals there. So animals with a backbone are called vertebrates. So animals with a backbone, so no congressman allowed, all right? And also no insects. See, insects would survive off the ark on mats of vegetation, pumice, things like that. So the small creatures could survive off the ark, but so the ark was there for the land vertebrates. Maybe some of the giant insects of the past could not survive on these things, and maybe that's why we haven't got giant dragonfly-like creatures which have wings like this. Okay. But also, how many different creatures were on board? I mean, I want to just show you that animals have, it's different kinds of animals. See, these are the same kind because they have babies together. If you have a male lion, female tiger, it's called a liger. The other way around, it's called a tigon. And they can have babies with leopards. They're called hybrids. Mixed parents are called hybrids. And a leopard can have babies with a slightly smaller cat and smaller and smaller. That you can trace it down. See, tigers and our pussycats can't have babies together, but there are creatures in between. Our pussycat can have babies with something a bit bigger, and so on and so on. And there is a connection with the tiger, which means all the cats family is one created kind. Again, the different varieties of that one created kind. Dogs and wolves and jackals are one kind, because again, there are babies that can be had between these things. There's a creature called a jaxie, which is a jackal and a husky. Quite a few of these different things. So, in fact, when you look at the number of different animals, it may have been not so many. You see, species, you talk about 38,000 species of land vertebrates, okay? You could do it, but in fact, if the kind was as big as the genus, which one genus has several different species, the kind is as big as the genus, say 16,000 animals. Remember, the ark could contain 100,000 sheep-sized animals. If the kind is the family, which is what I think it is in most cases, maybe about 2,000 animals were needed. Now, when you look at dinosaurs, well, I mean, I think some of these, they're given different names, but they're the same kind, because everything's the same except for their head ornament. That's the only thing that's different, is the head ornament. Everything else about them is the same kind of thing. So maybe, say, 50 dinosaurs kinds, okay. Now then the question is, well, how do you get big dinosaurs on the ark? Like these ones, like the behemoth, for instance. Well, the answer is they weren't big when they went on board. Because they've looked at growth rings on dinosaurs, and all the dinosaurs they analysed started off growing slowly, went through the sudden growth spurt, and then levelled off. So Noah, see, God was the one who brought the animals to Noah. See, God told Noah the animals will come to you. So God's taking care of that. Noah's not fetching them. God's taking care of that. So maybe God takes a 4-year-old of the Apatosaurus, which is called the Brontosaurus. If it got the wrong head, it's a Brontosaurus. Okay, Apatosaurus, maybe 4 years old when it came on board. A year later, he's off the ark. Not much bigger. Now it goes through the growth spurts to get to its full size. But all the while on the ark, it was a much smaller creature, maybe 1 ton. So that's the solution. Not as many animals as people think, but also the animals weren't necessarily fully grown when they went on board. So that's how you fit the animal on the ark. So this is a good time to sort of just a brief outline of dinosaurs, the ark. And just to sort of close with what caused the dinosaurs to die out, well, evolutionists don't know. Here's one evolutionary theory, the junkie theory. Narcotic plants evolved, the plant-eating dinosaurs died out, then the meat-eaters had nothing to hunt. Or you have the constipation theory, okay, it's another one, again affecting the plant-eaters first. The asteroid impact is a common one that you hear about a lot these days, but however, why didn't the asteroid wipe out crocodiles? Or frogs, or moths, or flowering plants, which are much more delicate than dinosaurs? I mean, dinosaurs were alleged to have ruled the earth for 180 million years. So how come dinosaurs got wiped out by the meteorite, but not these much more fragile creatures? So it seems to wipe out the wrong things. Also, the wrong evolutionary time, because evolutionists believe many dinosaurs were already gone before the supposed impact. So it couldn't, of course, work backwards in time. And my favorite evolutionary idea is that tobacco evolved and they all died of lung cancer. But in fact, I think the flood wiped out most of them, and I think humans hunted the rest of them. And humans could do that, because think of how humans hunted whales almost to extinction, even though whales had the home turf advantage in the sea, bigger brains, more intelligence, bigger creatures. The blue whale was bigger than any dinosaur, and yet humans almost wiped them out with handheld harpoons and wooden sailing ships. Okay, so we could do it to the whales, you could do it to land creatures with fire, weaponry, poison, traps, which you can't do to whales. Okay, so if we could almost wipe out whales, we could have wiped out dinosaurs, and probably did. Sorry. That's why I think there aren't any left today. So I don't believe dinosaurs, I think they are extinct now, but they didn't go extinct millions of years ago, but more like hundreds of years ago. So to conclude, before I go into to explain what we're doing, see, dinosaurs tell us about God's creativity. God made some magnificent creatures with incredible design features that we just don't know about. And then they tell us about the fall, which I'll talk about next in the main service, the fall of man, which means you have God's judgment, which is death, and the flood, God's judgment on incredibly wicked humans. And then you have God's providence. God gave people a way out. They could have gone on the ark, but Noah couldn't even get his brothers and sisters to come on. And we know he had brothers and sisters. And they even hint about the gospel, because there's only one way to escape the judgment of the flood that was to go on the ark. There's one way to escape the judgment of the second death, which is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. The only way. So just to explain let's have a look at some of the books we have that might help people decide. Here's a book for very young kids here, Little Dinosaurs on the Big Ark. Here's a book for a bit older kids. Here is maybe middle school, lower high school level. And there's actually a pack we have. I brought a few extra ones just in case you guys who are homeschool, you might like this pack. You get a few of these books plus some dinosaur flashcards. And a comic book thing here. Okay, so you got this dinosaur pack, which is a really good thing here. For those who want to know more, high school and adults, you might want Titans of the Earth, Sea and Air. And I always think that parents and grandparents should know more than their kids and grandkids about any topic they talk about. Okay, so this is one way to do that. This is a brand new thing here called the Rock Solid Bible Curriculum. It's hot off the press. And it should be good because my wife helped to edit it, so a lot of different things here. So now I'm happy to answer some questions you might have, some burning questions you might have about creation, evolution, Bible, whatever you like, really. Who wants to ask a question? Yes, sir. I see. Yep. Go ahead. I'm not really much up with the play on Atlantis, sorry, but I do think a lot of these legends may have been seeing some creatures we now call dinosaurs. Like I mentioned, the dragons of Chinese culture. Maybe, I'm not sure about the sea serpents and things, though. I don't think they were plesiosaurs somehow. I mean, in my Titans book, I talk about that. What could have been the sea serpent? Might have been. I've looked at quite a lot of things, I can promise you. You can just read my Titans book and you'll see that. Yeah. End time is sort of a bit out of my purview. I've got my own opinions, but see, creation ministries is about protology, beginning times, more than eschatology or end times. We just don't take a position on end time stuff, really. Jesus is certainly coming back. We take a position on that, no question there. But I won't go into any more detail on that. Yes, sir.
I saw an article about how there are actually fossils of things which are extremely modern, and they formed in a very short period of time.
Correct.
Heard anything about that type of thing?
Oh, we have a lot of that. We have a lot of stuff on our website about that. And so the Creation magazine I'll talk about next time as well. We have a lot of those different things where you got modern things found with dinosaurs. We got mammals eating dinosaurs, okay? Mammals are meant to have been sort of pushed under and become just tiny little shrew-like things because dinosaurs ruled the earth. And yet now we know there are some big mammal-type things that ate dinosaurs. Yeah. Yes, young lady.
So we know that dinosaurs didn't turn into birds.
Correct.
Do you think that they still might have had feathers?
I do not believe so. In fact, again, the Titans book I mentioned talks about, there's actually 2 chapters on the bird and dinosaur, the alleged bird-dinosaur connection and alleged feathers on the dinosaur. So yeah, I talk about that a lot in the Titans book. No, I don't believe dinosaurs have evolved into birds. No, they're quite different creatures. For one thing, dinosaurs had very powerful, very heavy hip bones, very powerful legs, while in birds, the center of gravity's moved upwards to have very powerful flight muscles. So quite a different anatomy. You've got, and the thing is, to try to go with natural selection, favoring different things, going from dino to bird, natural selection would kill anything that lowered the hip mass because it couldn't run as fast. So you actually want a big hip and also the long tail with muscle tails so it could actually control its running. But birds have lost those things, and that would be a problem, losing those things until you're ready to fly. And flying is a very difficult thing to do too. I mean, it took a while before humans could work out how to fly. And the Wright brothers looked at how birds fly to work out how to do it themselves. They saw what God had, the flyers that God had already made, and took some ideas from how the birds do it to make flying machines. An interesting thing there. So also, dinosaurs and birds have very different lung structure. See, dinosaurs breathed in and out like us, okay? From what we found with the fossil, where we do have lung information, they breathed in and out. While birds, they had a one-way air passes through lungs, and the air sacs in the bones that help them do that. In fact, the bird thigh is inside the body. What you think is the thigh is really the shin, and what you think is the knee is really the ankle. Because the thigh bone is involved with breathing. But with dinosaurs, the thigh was outside the body and involved with running. So again, very different types of creatures. And the so-called feathers really seem to be frayed fibers of collagen and not feathers, which are really complicated structures as well. So dinosaurs didn't have, no evidence that dinosaurs had proper feathers as opposed to fibers, for instance, which you find on things which aren't even dinosaurs as well. Like pterosaurs seem to have them, and so did some sea creatures, which aren't dinosaurs. Okay, question? Yes, sir.
I have an announcement. I texted in. Do you have any thoughts on how the Genome Project might have helped or hindered the understanding of the existence of dinosaurs?
Well, I don't know how the Genome Project could have helped that because I don't think we've got dinosaur genomes to analyze. That's a problem. It's interesting that dinosaur DNA has been discovered, and DNA is very unstable. Again, DNA should not be around for millions of years, and yet they've found DNA in a T-Rex bone and a duck-billed dinosaur bone, which should not be there if they're millions of years old, but it is very fragmented, so it's very hard to do a genome analysis when it just fragments of the pieces, as opposed to our DNA might be millions of letters long. In fact, the DNA in each of your cells, if it was put end to end, would be about 6 feet or so. That's in every one of your cells. That's how long the DNA is. Total, okay? But with dinosaurs, it's fragmented into different parts, okay? So you just could not do a genome analysis on dinosaurs because we haven't got the genes to do it, unfortunately. Sorry. Question? Yes, sir.
Seems like I hear more creationists and Christians talk about
Well, they're wrong. I'll do that next time. Next talk, I'll talk about that. And also chapter 2 of this book here. I talk about that. This is about the days of creation, this book here. This book has chapters on dinosaur, a chapter on where the floodwater came and where it went, and also a chapter on the ark is there, okay, so in this book, but also a chapter on days of creation, and also the gap theory is chapter 3, radioactive dating is chapter 4, distant satellites chapter 5, okay. Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Well, I know sometimes in sort of slang, they might talk about the plesiosaurs as marine dinosaurs. It's not correct to do that because, as you just pointed out, they did not have the distinctive leg and hip structure of dinosaurs. So, no, it's not proper to call them dinosaurs. It's not proper to call the air creatures dinosaurs. See, our book is called Titans of the Earth, Sea and Air, but we didn't say dinosaurs of earth, sea, and air, okay, for that reason, because those things aren't dinosaurs. The air creatures, the sea creatures are not properly called dinosaurs. So I think you got the right answer in the process of asking. You had the right answer, so thank you for that. You had a question there? I think I saw a question up there. Yes, sir. I wasn't forgetting you.
With the change in the culture being involved in this for decades, how has the increase in more than atheistic worldview how has that changed your approach or tactic in apologetics?
Well, I mean, I think we have to start young. I think I'm very much a big fan of school choice and homeschooling because the government schools have become more and more anti-Christian. They were anti-Christian enough because the Bible says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of knowledge, okay? And the government schools don't have the fear of God, so how can they be really imparting knowledge or wisdom? But now they're telling you that you can't even, you don't even know if you're a boy or a girl, you can choose that too, apparently. That's what they're telling you now. Without parents' permission in many cases. I mean, it's interesting. Some states will ban tattoos for minors, but they allow genital changes, surgical changes for minors without parents' permission. Tattoo, no, you've got to get parents' permission for tattoo, but not for horrible mutilations that they're doing. So there's some horrible things going on. I wouldn't trust them anymore, honestly. I'm a fan of homeschooling myself. I'm not saying you have to homeschool to be a Christian. I'm not saying that. I'm not judging you for what you do with your kids. It's your business, not mine, okay? Or anyone else's, but I'm just saying what I prefer. And I think starting young, which is why we were increasingly doing more books for kids and for teenagers to try to sort of get them, to give them the truth right from the young. Because all they hear is evolution and millions of years. That's what they're going to believe. In fact, if you ask most people why they believe in evolution and millions of years, I'll tell you that's all we know. All they've heard. Now, why is that? And again, next time I'll talk about why, if kids are actually exposed to why evolution doesn't work, they're more likely to stay in church when they leave home too. So that's a good thing. So I do think that we've almost left the young people by handing them over to atheists to indoctrinate. I think that's the way to lose the younger generation. I can't imagine Moses sending his kids to the Canaanite schools to be indoctrinated, okay? I mean, I don't think they've got our interests at heart. If a teacher's prepared to take your daughter for an abortion without telling you, or for a gender reassignment, as they call it, I don't trust them. They haven't got your kids' best interests at heart, okay? I'm not saying, again, there are good teachers in the schools. I'm not denying that. There are good Christian teachers in the schools, but in fact, can they be good if the curriculum is so opposed to biblical Christian morality and history? That's a problem. Okay, question. Yes. That's about right. I calculated about 6,190 years old, but I don't care if you quibble with a few years here or there. But you do when you, I'll just find my slides on that. I'll show you why I believe that. Here we go. Oh. So I've got a lot of different things here. I try to make my life easier by having an index for my question slides. Oh, I can't find that one. Okay. I know. Hang on. All sorts of things here. That's how you do it, though. This is how you work out the age of the earth. You add up the age at the birth of the next son in line. And the thing is, there are no time gaps there because, see, Adam was 130 years old when he became the father of Seth. Now, see, even if Adam was a great-grandfather of Seth, there's still 130 years between them. And same with the numbers going down. See, even if they're not father and son relationships, we are still told the age of this person when the next person was born. So there's no time gap there. Even if there are people gaps, there are no time gaps there, okay? I think they're actually father and son. I've got no reason to believe anything different because Adam and Eve named Seth, and Seth named Enos, and Lamech named Noah. Noah went onto the ark with his sons, okay? So these are father-son relations going on there. But this is why we can actually work out the age of the earth is around about 6,000 years old now, okay? So that's how we do that. So I don't see any way of getting even up to about 8,000. But see, if you use the Greek text, you might be able to find a way of getting up to 7,500 years old. Now, when you look at some of the Christian writers throughout history, they all believe the earth was under 6,000 years old at the time of writing. They go to the church fathers like Augustine, for instance, Martin Luther, John Calvin. They all thought the world had not yet reached 6,000 years. This is a very long and respectable Christian tradition that the earth wasn't even 6,000 years old when they wrote several 100,000 years ago. Now it's a bit over 6,000 years old, but not by much. So, question, anyone? Yeah. So 6,000 years is about right.